more straight talk with Trent on Girls Can Tell.
Americans think dating is hard everywhere. It's not. The way dating works in the United States is actually an outlier. App-driven, hyper-individualistic, and weirdly professionalized. Like a never-ending series of job interviews where no one feels safe enough to be fully honest. Here, dating apps have turned people into profiles. We have filters for our preferences, and the process kind of feels like a marketplace where you're both the product and the shopper at the same time. That constant swiping and evaluating creates this low-level feeling of anxiety and exhaustion, like you're always on, but not really ever seen. Other countries don't do it this way. In France, there isn't really a dating culture in the American sense. In Japan, the process can feel structured and family involved. In Denmark and the broader Nordic culture, dating is casual, slow-moving, and often almost accidental. So in this episode, we're going to take a look at how dating works in France, Japan, and Denmark, three very different prototypes. When Americans picture French romance, they imagine dramatic declarations, wine, maybe a baguette, and someone smoking on a balcony or anywhere. But French dating culture is very different from the swipe first, define the relationship on week 3 model that we have here in the US. In the US, there are stages: talking, going on dates, seeing each other, and then finally the infamous "what are we" conversation that two people have to try to define it with labels. In France, that formal dating phase is much less pronounced. There often is no long, casual, dating multiple people stage at all. Instead, people tend to meet through friends, school, work, or social settings, and then simply start spending time together. There may be dinners, walks, late nights, talking, but nobody sits down for a formal negotiation about exclusivity the way many Americans do. The key difference is, as soon as there's a first kiss, culturally that implies you are now a couple. French cultural observers consistently note this pattern. Once you kiss, exclusivity is assumed without needing to have a conversation about it, something I learned firsthand to be very true. That means in French relationships, there's a built-in expectation of loyalty and focus from much earlier on. A cultural anthropologist who studied French-American differences found that the French operate on an implicit understanding in relationships, while Americans need everything verbalized and labeled at every stage. Another difference is the order of intimacy. In France, physical intimacy can happen early, but it exists inside a quickly established couplehood instead of months of ambiguous, non-exclusive situationships. People may take emotional disclosure slowly, but they're not juggling other romantic interests while deciding if they want to commit. This works for people there because it reduces the pressure around each interaction. If you're not auditioning for a role against a lineup of competitors, you can just sort of be yourself. Secondly, it takes away some of the decision fatigue Americans experience when dating is framed as shopping for the best possible match out of endless options. Research on choice overload shows having too many options actually decreases satisfaction and increases anxiety, exactly what happens with dating apps. There's a lot less of an obsession with labels and milestones. You don't need to send the "what are we" text because the structure answers the question. Once you're together, you're together. That frees mental energy that, in the US, often gets spent on decoding text messages, reading between the lines of social media, and trying to guess whether exclusivity is implied or not. So if American dating is like a never-ending series of interviews, French dating is closer to like, we're doing this until we're not, with much more assumed loyalty from the start. Japan offers almost the exact opposite structure, where relationships can be quite formal, intentional, and family involved. Historically, arranged introductions and matchmakers, called omiai, have played a role in connecting people who are seen as compatible in background, values, and life stage. It functions more like structural matchmaking, sometimes with families or professional matchmakers involved. As recently as 2015, about 5.5% of Japanese marriages still came from traditional omiai arrangements, down from over 60% in the 1960s, but still a real part of the culture. Even today, more modern versions exist through matchmaking agencies and events where people explicitly attend to find long-term partners, not casual flings. Apps like Paris and omiai market themselves specifically for serious relationships. Beyond arranged introductions, dating norms in Japan tend to be slower paced and more clearly defined than in the US. There's often a distinct moment where the person asks the other to go out in a formal way, moving from casual acquaintance to an acknowledged romantic relationship. Without it, two people might spend months hanging out without ever confirming they're actually dating. Communication style plays a huge role here. Japanese culture typically values nonverbal cues, subtlety, and reading the atmosphere, which can be confusing for Westerners. Physical displays of affection in public can be more restrained, and emotional disclosure may unfold slowly, with a lot of meaning carried in small gestures rather than big speeches. Gender roles and expectations can also differ. Some research shows that while Japanese women increasingly initiate relationships, traditional expectations about long-term roles still shape dating behavior significantly. At the same time, there's often less emphasis on serial casual dating and more on whether someone is a suitable long-term partner. Matching agencies in Japan explicitly market themselves as solutions for people who are serious about marriage and tired of unstructured, ambiguous dating. This gives people a clear sense of why they're meeting and what the potential outcome is, rather than an open-ended, let's see where this goes, like in the American app culture. This structured approach reduces anxiety for many people there. If you're meeting someone through OmniEye, you know the general intention is long-term. Because expectations are shared, people spend less time decoding ambiguous signals and more time evaluating real compatibility, family values, life goals, and practical fit. There are downsides, of course. The same structure that brings clarity can also create pressure to conform, and cultural norms around emotional expression may make it hard for some people to articulate what they actually want. Japanese sociologists have documented the rise of people who actively opt out of traditional dating patterns, partly because the expectations feel too rigid. But compared to the American model, Japanese dating often trades spontaneity and chemistry-first energy for predictability and commitment. Now, swing up to Denmark and the broader Nordic vibe, where dating can feel extremely casual, low pressure, and almost anti-dramatic. If French culture emphasizes quick couplehood and Japanese culture emphasizes structure, Danish and Nordic cultures often emphasize comfort, equality, and calm. One thing that stands out in descriptions of Nordic dating is the lack of big gestures. Bragging and showiness are discouraged, modesty and being down to earth are valued culturally, and that absolutely shows up in how people date. People often meet through friend groups, schools, hobbies, or social events, and then just keep hanging out. There might not be a clear first date with all the US rituals. Instead, you grab a coffee, join a group, activity, or casually end up spending more and more time one-on-one together. No one's expected to put on a performance to win the other over. In fact, in Nordic cultures, being too smooth or trying too hard can come off as suspicious or inauthentic. In Denmark, it's consistently reported that trying to be charming or using pickup lines will make people think you're insecure. Genuine awkwardness is actually more attractive. The attraction is often in being relaxed, competent, and emotionally even. This also plays out in how initiative works. Some accounts of Nordic dating mention that people can be equally passive. No one is aggressively chasing or making grand declarations. Gender roles are more equal, and it's normal for women to make moves or set the tone in dating. Relationships in Denmark often form slowly, almost by osmosis. You hang out, you keep choosing each other in low-pressure settings, and at some point, it's just understood that you're together. There's usually not a dramatic define the relationship moment. Instead, your day-to-day behaviors answer the question for you. It works because it removes a lot of performance anxiety when you're not constantly asking, did I impress them enough on this one date? Because the connection builds across repeated ordinary interactions. Secondly, it aligns with cultural preferences for emotional steadiness and equality, where both people meet each other halfway rather than one person pursuing the other. Of course, the flip side to this passivity can lead to missed opportunities if no one is willing to be direct. But compared to the US, where dating often feels like a high-stakes pitch, the Danish approach intentionally lowers the stakes so the comfort and compatibility have room to work. So now there's three contrasting models: the quick couplehood of France, the structured intentionality of Japan, and the slow, casual, equality-focused progression of Denmark. Each one solves a different problem that American dating creates. Which brings us back home. If you live in the US, it can feel like dating is just objectively broken everywhere. But a lot of what hurts here is specific to how American culture has designed the process. First, Americans have turned dating into a job interview. You think about the typical dating app, and two people have never met sitting across from each other, running through a list of questions about work, hobbies, past relationships, and future plans. The job interview energy is reinforced by the apps themselves. Profiles emphasize branding, photos, witty captions, bullet points about interests. So people show up to dates already in sort of performance mode, trying to align with the image that they created online. This makes it hard to relax into genuine connection, because each interaction feels like an evaluation with potential rejection just one awkward silence away. Second, apps have commodified people. When you can swipe through hundreds of faces a night, it trains the brain to see potential partners as interchangeable units instead of complex, real human beings. Psychologists have talked about this, so when we have too many options, they become less satisfied with their choices, a lot more anxious about missing out, and more likely to second-guess their decisions when they do make them. More research has showed that app users found significantly higher levels of dating anxiety and lower relationship satisfaction compared to people who met partners offline. There's also a strange mismatch in expectations. Many Americans expect instant chemistry, that electric feeling on date one, but also expect commitment to unfold carefully and slowly over time. Dating researchers point out that compatibility can't be predicted from profiles. It emerges through actual in-person interactions over time. So the bar for the second date can become unrealistically high, while the bar for emotional investment stays pretty much vague and low. That leads to dynamics like fast physical intimacy without clear emotional intentions, a rush of texting and attention followed by sudden distance or ghosting when the initial dopamine spike fades out. Situationships where people act like partners but avoid any actual commitment. Underneath all of this is an American value called radical individualism. Individualism can be empowering. It allows people to leave bad relationships and design their own path. But when taken to an extreme, it also means there's very little community, family, or cultural structure supporting how people meet, vet, and commit to each other. In Japan, there are matchmakers and family frameworks. In France, there are strong norms about what it means to be together. In Denmark, there's a shared understanding that low-key, equal, comfort connection is the goal. In the US, most people are left to invent their own rules, while simultaneously operating inside a market-driven app ecosystem designed to keep them swiping instead of settling. In 2017, online dating became the most common way American couples met, surpassing all other methods. So Americans end up in a system where the process is optimized for volume instead of depth. The culture talks about freedom but offers very little guidance. People are encouraged to protect themselves emotionally, but not given the tools to actually build secure, lasting bonds. It's no wonder why so many people describe modern dating as exhausting, confusing, or impossible, even though they technically have more options than any previous generation. Dating doesn't have to be this hard. That misery is not your proof that people are broken, but it is evidence that the system we're using was not designed for genuine connection. France shows what happens when you drop the prolonged ambiguity and commit earlier, even if things still end sometimes. Japan shows the relief that comes from a clear structure and shared expectations, where everyone knows the rules of the game. Denmark shows the power of taking performance pressure out of the equation altogether and letting comfort and equality lead. America, right now, is running a dating experiment. High choice, low structure, app-mediated, and hyper-individualistic. It delivers a lot of matches, a lot of stories, but not nearly enough structure, grounded relationships for the amount of effort people are putting into it. But we can borrow from what works, like from France, less obsession with the talk, more assumption of focus once there's real intimacy. And from Japan, more intentionality and clearer conversations about long-term goals. From Denmark, more low-key group hangs, more equality, less pressure to dazzle on every first date. American dating is uniquely open to being redesigned by quietly changing the rules you personally play by, choosing depth over volume, clarity over ambiguity, and connection over performance. Because we got to start somewhere, and if you don't change the dating apps, then who's going to be out there doing it? Just me? And we all have to work on this. Be a little more choosy. Be a little less judgmental. Or maybe I have no idea what I'm talking about, but I'm talking about it anyway. You decide.